Good afternoon and salam Malaysia Madani. You're watching World Today with me, Daryl Baptist. To begin our bulletin, here's a quick look on the stories we're following. US President Donald Trump on Monday said that he would raise tariffs on South Korean goods, including autos, lumber and pharmaceuticals, accusing the country of not living up to an earlier trade pact struck with Washington. The increase would bring tariff levels from 15% to 25%. Writing on his Truth social platform, Trump added that he was increasing tariff rates because the Korean legislature has not enacted the historic trade agreement, which is their prerogative. Meanwhile, shares of South Korea's automakers clawed back early losses after US President Donald Trump said in a social media post he would raise tariffs on South Korean goods, including autos, from 25% from 15%. Shares of Hyundai Motor reversed course to gain 1.1% after falling as much as 4.8% earlier, while sister company Kia Corp was down 1% after dropping as much as 6%. Some analysts said, however, that South Korea-US trade negotiations had already been agreed at the presidential level. On another note, India plans to slash tariffs on cars imported from the European Union to 40% from as high as 110%. Sources said in the biggest opening yet of the country's vast market as the two sides close in on a free trade pact. Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi's government has agreed to immediately reduce the tax on a limited number of cars from the 27-nation bloc with an import price of more than 15,000 euros. China will work to boost domestic consumption in services while stepping up efforts to push consumers to buy more goods, an official said on Monday, in the latest move to address industrial overcapacity and reduce the economy's reliance on overseas demand. China will nurture fresh growth areas in service consumption and grasp the trend of consumption upgrading, Vice Commerce Minister Yang Dong said at a news conference, citing potential growth areas including transportation, tourism, automotive, domestic services such as cleaning and online services, including live streaming. Hundreds of evacuees have taken shelter at a makeshift evacuation center after a landslide in Indonesia's West Java province killed at least 17 people and left dozens missing. The impacted Pasir Langu village is located in a hilly area of the province, about 100 kilometers southeast of Indonesia's capital, Jakarta, with more than 30 houses buried by the landslide. Judges at the International Criminal Court, or ICC, have ruled that the octogenarian former Philippines President Rodrigo Duterte is fit to attend pre-trial hearings and will hold a confirmation of charges hearing on the 23rd of February, according to the court in a statement. Duterte was taken into custody by the International Criminal Court on the 12th of March following his arrest in Manila on murder charges linked to his war on drugs, in which thousands of purported dealers and users were killed. Thousands marked Australia's National Day on Monday by attending an Invasion Day demonstration through the streets of Sydney in support of the country's Indigenous community. Protesters gathered at Hyde Park in the centre of Sydney, where they paid tribute to those killed by a gunman in a rural New South Wales town last week and talked about the high number of Indigenous deaths in police custody before marching through the city. Australia Day commemorates the day Britain established the state of New South Wales as a penal colony, with the arrival in Sydney of ships bringing colonists and convicts. 7 suspended heritage football players involved in the alleged falsification of identification documents have been allowed to resume playing. According to the Football Association of Malaysia, or FAM, the Court of Arbitration for Sport, CAS, had granted the players submission for a stay of execution.
Guna mentol jimat tenaga untuk lebih jimat.
Welcome back, folks. We now continue with the complete bulletin of World Today. United States President Donald Trump on Monday said that he was increasing tariffs on South Korean imports into the U.S. related to autos, lumber and pharmaceuticals to 25%. In a posting on social media, Trump made the announcement while accusing the Allies' legislature of not living up to its trade deal with Washington. South Korea's presidential Blue House did not have an immediate comment. South Korea had been working to implement a deal announced with Washington in November that was going to lower U.S. tariffs against its exports. Seoul and Washington reached a deal last October, which included a pledge from South Korea to invest $350 billion in the U.S., some of which would go to shipbuilding. More recently, South Korea has engaged with Washington to explain Seoul's probe of US-based e-commerce company Coupang stemming from a mass data leak. Trump has used the leverage of tariffs throughout his second term in office in his foreign policy. Economists have raised concerns about the approach, and the policy also faces a test in an ongoing case at the US Supreme Court. Venezuela expects about $1.4 billion in investment in oil projects operating under production sharing contracts this year. Interim President Delcy Rodriguez said on Monday, up from nearly $900 million in 2025. Rodriguez spoke to oil executives, lawyers and lawmakers at state company PDVSA's Caracas headquarters during the discussion of a proposed reform of the country's main oil law, which would incorporate the output sharing contracts.
Están también las empresas mixtas. Nosotros ya tenemos al día de hoy 29 CPP suscritos. El año pasado la inversión fue casi de $900 millones y para este año se estima y se proyecta una inversión de $1.400 millones. En las empresas mixtas, que tenemos 44 empresas mixtas, igual. Son modelos que confluyen.
The U.S. has taken control of Venezuela's oil exports and revenue following a military incursion to capture President Nicolas Maduro earlier this month and a naval blockade to stop oil shipments on sanctioned vessels since December. U.S. President Donald Trump is pushing U.S. oil companies to invest massively in the country's dilapidated industry to reverse decades of mismanagement and underinvestment. For many investors, one of the biggest obstacles to secure capital for Venezuela is a long-standing legal framework that gives state-run oil company PDVSA a monopoly on operating projects in the oil and gas sector. German Foreign Minister Johann Wadephul called for Europe and NATO to increase pressure on Russia to end the war in Ukraine and increase support for the Ukrainians. Wadephul called for a two-pronged approach, namely increasing pressure on Russia to show that the costs of continuing its senseless war are only about to rise, and intensifying political, financial and military support for Ukraine to achieve a sustainable and just peace without rewarding the aggressor. The German foreign minister also said Russian President Vladimir Putin was creating a humanitarian crisis by attacking Ukraine's civilian energy structure, or rather infrastructure, in winter to break Ukrainian resistance. Wadephul also said he welcomed U.S. President Donald Trump's statement that he would not use military force or tariffs regarding Greenland and was willing to address Arctic security concerns within the NATO framework. Meanwhile, he denounced Russia's stubborn insistence on the crucial territorial issue, following talks between Russian, Ukrainian and U.S. envoys in Abu Dhabi on ending the Ukraine war. The Council of the European Union, or EU, on Monday gave a final approval to a ban on imports of Russian pipeline gas and liquefied natural gas, or LNG, into the EU. A full ban is set to come into force from January 2027 for LNG and from the autumn of the same year for pipeline gas. The prohibition on importing Russian pipeline gas and LNG will take effect 6 weeks after the regulations enter into force, while existing contracts will be given a transition period to wind down. Before authorizing gas to enter the EU, national authorities will have to verify the country where the gas was produced, a measure aimed at preventing circumvention. The regulation sets out tough penalties for breaches, including maximum fines of at least 2.5 million euros for individuals and for companies 40 million euros, or at least 3.5% of worldwide annual turnover, or 3 times the estimated transaction turnover. EU countries must submit national diversification plans by the 1st of March and identify challenges in replacing remaining Russian gas. Russian oil fell to below 3% of the bloc's total oil imports in 2025, but Russian gas still made up an estimated 13% of EU gas imports last year, worth more than 15 billion euros annually. Coming up next, China-Finland pledge deeper trade ties at Beijing business meeting. Officials and business leaders from China and Finland on Monday signed new agreements and pledged deeper trade ties in Beijing during Finnish Prime Minister Petteri Orpo's ongoing visit to China. The 6th China-Finland Committee for Innovative Business Cooperation meeting, a long-standing cooperation mechanism aimed at linking the two country companies, capital and innovation, was co-hosted by the Chinese Ministry of Commerce and the Finnish Ministry of Economic Affairs and Employment. The gathering brought together representatives from the government and business sectors spanning the fields of energy, manufacturing, aviation, healthcare and sustainability. Orpo, who arrived in the Chinese capital on the previous day, said he hopes his visit will open doors to Finnish companies, and the meeting was primarily about matchmaking, connecting policy priorities with real business needs and turning cooperation into concrete projects. In a speech at the meeting, Orpo said his visit also sends a broader signal of commitment to cooperation, even as global trade faces rising uncertainties. Chinese President Xi Jinping on Monday held phone talks with Tu Lam, General Secretary of the Communist Party of Vietnam, or CPV, Central Committee. Xi expressed congratulations over the successful convening of the 14th National Congress of the CPV and to Tu Lam re-election as General Secretary of the CPV Central Committee. Xi expressed his belief that under the leadership of the CPV Central Committee, headed by Lam, Vietnam will surely fulfill the goals and tasks set forth by the 14th National Congress and realize an early date the 2 goals set for the centenary of the party and the country respectively. He added that China and Vietnam should keep to their paths and not sway in their commitment, unite and cooperate to promote development and work together towards a bright future. China is working to realize the 2nd centenary goal of building China into a great modern socialist country in all respects, while Vietnam is also in a new era of national development. Xi said the two sides should hold firm to their beliefs, uphold fundamental principles, and break new grounds, fend off and diffuse various risks and challenges, jointly defend the cause of socialism, and preserve the political essence of China-Vietnam relations. European Union leaders Ursula von der Leyen and Antonio Costa attended India's 77th Republic Day as chief guests, as the country enthralled visitors with military might and cultural grandeur. Von der Leyen and Costa are expected to announce on Tuesday the conclusion of negotiations on a long-coveted trade deal between India and the EU, which both sides have hailed as historic amid strained ties with the United States. The deal paves the way for free trade of goods between the bloc of 27 European nations and India, which together account for about a quarter of the world's gross domestic product, and represent a market of 2 billion consumers. India became a republic on the 26th of January 1950, shedding dominion status, which marks the day of enactment of the Constitution. As the day's festivities drew to a close, thousands of spectators gathered at the Atari Wagah border in Punjab to witness the traditional flag-lowering ceremony marking the conclusion of India's 77th Republic Day celebrations. The ceremony is jointly conducted by the Border Security Forces of India and Pakistan and features synchronized formations, cultural displays, and the ceremonial lowering of the two national flags before the border gates are closed. France's National Assembly debated legislation to ban children under 15 years old from social media on Monday amid growing concerns about online bullying and mental health risks. The bill proposes banning under-15s from social networks and social networking functionalities embedded within broader platforms, reflects rising public angst over the impact of social media on minors. It will then pass to the Senate before a final vote in the lower house, and President Emmanuel Macron has pointed to social media as one factor to blame for violence among young people. He is urging France to follow Australia, whose world first ban for under-16s on social media platforms, including Facebook, Snapchat, TikTok and YouTube, came into force in December. Macron wants the ban in place in time for the start of the next academic year in September. Australia's social media ban is being studied in countries including Britain, Denmark, Spain and Greece. The European Parliament has called for the European Union to set minimum ages for children to access social media, although it is up to member states to impose age limits.
Bersihkan penapis penghawa dingin dan tetapkan 24 darjah Celsius untuk lebih jimat.
Coming up in sports, 7 suspended mixed heritage players cleared for temporary return. Stay with us. The Court of Arbitration for Sports, CAS, has allowed 7 suspended Harimau Malaya players to resume playing, according to the Football Association of Malaysia, or FAM. In a statement posted on Facebook, FAM said CAS had granted the application for a stay of execution submitted by the 7 players. 7 Harimau Malaya players have been handed a lifeline after the Court of Arbitration for Sport, or CAS, granted a stay of execution, allowing them to return to football action with immediate effect. This decision, according to FAM, means that the 12-month suspension from all football-related activities imposed by FIFA on the 7 Harimau Malaya players has been temporarily suspended. FAM said the players are allowed to continue their careers and take part in any football-related activities until a final decision on the appeal at CAS is made. The players are Facundo Garces, Rodrigo Halgado, Imanol Machucha, João Figueiredo, Gabriel Palmero, John Irazabal and Hector Hevel. FIFA had previously suspended the 7 players over allegations of document falsification. FAM had appealed to challenge the FIFA sanction on the mixed heritage players and the national body over doctored eligibility documents.
Perlawanan bola sepak Piala Malaysia dengan barisan 16 pasukan terbaik, gabungan pasukan baharu dan pasukan-pasukan elit bakal merancakan aksi pertembungan bagi menaklukki tahta terulung bola sepak Malaysia. Bersama RTM, rakan penyiar.
That's it from us this afternoon. I'm Daryl Baptist. Malaysia Tonight comes on at 8:30 p.m. this evening on TV1 and MyTV's Berita RTM news channel. Thank you for watching, and I hope you're all enjoying or are about to enjoy a scrumptious lunch. Good day, Malaysia.